In 2009, a Colorado family of 4 went hiking and vanished without a trace. No screams, no bodies, just an abandoned tent buried under snow, discovered 14 years later by a drone. What that drone led to would unravel one of the most chilling wilderness mysteries in modern history. On the morning of July 8, 2009, the Harrington family packed up their SUV in the driveway of their quiet suburban home in Boulder, Colorado. It was still early, just after 6 a.m., but the sky was already bright, the sun promising a warm summer day ahead. Birds chirped from the telephone wires. The sprinklers on the neighbor's lawn hissed quietly in the background. Rachel Harrington, 37, loaded a small cooler of sandwiches into the back seat while her husband, Mark, 41, double-checked the hiking gear: 2 packs, a GPS, 2 water purifiers, and a compact first aid kit. They were experienced hikers, especially in the high elevations of Colorado. The trip they were heading on wasn't anything new. Just a long-day hike in the Sawatch Range about 2 hours southwest. It was a trail they'd done before. Their 2 children, Lily, age 9, and Sam, age 6, clambered into the back seat, half asleep but excited. Rachel had promised them popsicles from the freezer chest at the general store in Leadville after the hike. It was a simple tradition, one they'd started the year before. They drove off around 6:20 a.m. A neighbor's doorbell camera caught the SUV turning out of the cul-de-sac, Rachel in the passenger seat waving to someone off camera. That video would later be shown on local news dozens of times. Frozen on the moment Rachel smiled. It was the last verified image ever taken of her. The Harringtons were headed to the South Pine Trail, a moderately challenging 11-mile loop that wound through forest and meadows, eventually cresting over a ridge with views of Mount Elbert to the west. It was a local favorite, not too crowded, especially on weekdays. That day, there were only 3 cars in the parking lot when they arrived around 8:15 a.m., according to time-stamped security logs at the nearby forestry station. And then, they vanished. First, no one worried. It wasn't unusual for hikers to lose track of time or camp overnight if conditions changed. Rachel had texted her sister the day before saying, "Going to be off the grid for the day. Trail time equals family time, smiling face with smiling eyes." The plan was to be back home by 9 p.m. at the latest. But 9 p.m. came and went. Then midnight. By sunrise the next morning, Rachel's sister, worried after not hearing anything, called the police. Boulder PD performed a welfare check. The house was empty. No signs of trouble. Mail was stacked neatly on the kitchen counter. Mark's phone was off. So was Rachel's. Attempts to ping their GPS units failed, out of service range. The car wasn't at the house. That's when the call was made to Leadville authorities. By noon on July 9th, a park ranger located their vehicle in the gravel lot at the trailhead. It was locked, undisturbed. The inside was clean, snacks and a half-full water bottle visible in the center console. Nothing seemed out of place, but there was no sign of the Harringtons. Search and rescue teams mobilized within hours. Helicopters swept the air. Canine units combed the trail. Park volunteers joined hands in long chains, scouring undergrowth and riverbeds. A storm rolled in on the evening of the second day, grounding aircraft and making foot searches dangerous. But still they pushed on. By the 4th day, national media caught the scent. The headlines read, "Colorado family vanishes on popular trail. Search widens for Harrington family. Mystery deepens in mountain disappearance." Local journalist Dana Crowley was assigned to the story for the Leadville Daily Record. Young, hungry, And just a year into her job, she camped out in a borrowed tent near the ranger station, filing nightly reports and snapping photos of the unfolding operation. She remembered the moment clearly. It felt like everyone believed we'd find them, exhausted or injured maybe, but alive. But they didn't find them. No tracks, no gear, no clothing, not a single broken branch indicating struggle or panic. The trail was well maintained, but narrow in parts. Even if they had gotten lost, they should have left some sign. Yet the forest remained quiet. Rumors began swirling quickly. Some blamed wild animals, bears, mountain lions. Others speculated about a fall or a wrong turn leading them off a cliff. A few internet commenters insisted they faked it, planned their own disappearance to escape debt or responsibility. But those who knew the family disagreed. Mark was a high school chemistry teacher. Rachel worked part-time as a physical therapist. They had no known enemies, no history of financial trouble, no mental health red flags. Their kids were well-adjusted. Lily was on the swim team. Sam had just learned to ride without training wheels. Friends described them as stable, loving, organized to a fault. They weren't the kind of people to vanish on purpose. The search officially ended on August 2nd. By then, over 200 volunteers had logged nearly 3,000 man-hours on foot. Nothing was found, not even a lost shoelace. The trail closed for the season shortly after, as the first autumn snows began falling in higher elevations. The Harringtons became a cold case. Rachel's sister never stopped calling the sheriff's department. Mark's students left notes taped to his office door for weeks. A memorial bench was installed at the trailhead the following summer. Etched in metal beneath a carving of pine trees, the mountains are silent, but we still listen. In loving memory of the Harrington family. July 8, 2009. 14 years later, that bench would become the gathering point for something far more unimaginable. Because sometimes the snow gives back what it once buried. And when it does, not everyone is ready for what it reveals. By July 10, 2009, 2 days after the Harrington family failed to return, Leadville, Colorado, was buzzing with voices, theories, and search crews. Temporary canopies had been set up at the trailhead, humming with walkie-talkies, thermoses of burnt coffee, and laminated topographic maps spread across folding tables. Everyone had the same question. How could a family of 4 just vanish without a trace? Sheriff Evan Rourke, a 26-year veteran of the department, led the effort. In his first press conference, he stood before reporters with a solemn expression and said, "We're treating this as an active search and rescue. There is no indication at this time of foul play. We believe the Harrington family is somewhere on that mountain, and we're doing everything we can to bring them home." But behind closed doors, doubts were growing. The dogs weren't picking up consistent scent trails. Helicopter flyovers found nothing unusual. No bright gear, no heat signatures, no scattered debris. And then there was the eerie quiet in the woods. Rangers reported an unusual absence of birdsong and animal prints, as if something had pushed the wildlife deeper into the timber. Dana Crowley, just 24 and still proving herself at the Daily Record, started digging deeper. She camped alongside volunteers and recorded their frustrations, their hopes, their fears. In one early interview, a retired ranger named Wallace Lane said, "I've been on these trails my whole life. You don't just lose a whole family in the Sawatch. Someone always stumbles back. Someone finds a sign. This feels different." By the end of the first week, missing posters were plastered all across Colorado. News vans lined the narrow mountain road. A GoFundMe for the search effort raised over $30,000 in 48 hours. People mailed in drone footage, old trail cam logs, even blurry photos from hikers who might have seen someone wearing a red jacket. One tip led searchers down a dried-up creek bed. Another suggested a shallow cave 3 miles off trail. Nothing. No gear. No footprints. No torn clothing. It was as if the forest had simply swallowed the Harringtons whole. Theories shifted. Animal attack? Possible, but unlikely. Even if a predator surprised them, there would have been evidence. Blood, a shoe, drag marks. Not to mention it was 4 people. No known predator in the area could silently take down an entire family without leaving traces. Getting lost? The trail was well marked, and Mark was experienced. Even if they had wandered, the kids would have left a trail, candy wrappers, crayon drawings, something. Foul play? The idea gained traction. Online forums exploded with speculation. Maybe they'd run into someone on the trail, another hiker, or worse, someone hiding. Someone with a reason to silence them. One forum post read, "Check the mines. There are hundreds of abandoned shafts out there. Perfect place to hide something you never want found." That possibility took hold in the minds of locals. Old-timers recalled the mining boomtown era, how entire families had vanished into shafts and never been recovered. Sheriff Rourke assigned units to search known entrances, but it was a labyrinth out there. Hundreds of miles of collapsed tunnels, overgrown and undocumented. Meanwhile, Dana Crowley started interviewing people who knew the Harringtons back in Boulder. She visited their neighbors, their church, Lily's swim coach. Everyone described them as normal, devoted, happy. But one source, a friend of Rachel's named Marissa, offered something new. She'd been tense lately, Marissa said, like nervous about something. She told me once she hated the sound of knocking at night. Even joked that she thought someone was watching their house. Dana asked if Rachel had reported anything. "Not that I know of, but she said something weird a couple weeks before they left." She said, "I think Mark knows something he hasn't told me." I asked her what she meant, but she just shook her head and said she was probably being paranoid. The quote stuck with Dana. She wrote it in her notebook and underlined it twice. By mid-July, the mood shifted. The search became quieter. Crews rotated out. Equipment was packed away. Theories thinned, and so did media coverage. Other stories took center stage: elections, celebrity arrests, weather disasters. The Harrington family became just another unsolved headline. On August 3rd, the sheriff's department made a grim announcement. Active search efforts were being suspended. "We will continue to investigate any and all credible leads," Rourke said, reading from a prepared statement. "But at this time, based on the available evidence, we have no further ground action planned." The news hit the community hard. Volunteers who had walked for miles with blisters and broken hopes stood in silence. Rachel's sister, Elise, publicly begged for the search to continue. She even offered to fund it privately. But there was nothing left to search. The mountains had closed up again. In the months that followed, the Harrington home was boxed up and eventually sold. Photos were removed from mantels. The children's toys, still lined up by color in the playroom, were packed away. Alex Norman, Mark's best friend, took the family dog. A year later, the yellow lab died suddenly of a heart condition. Dana kept the case alive, at least in print. Every anniversary, she ran a small piece in the Daily Record. 4 years later, no trace of the Harringtons. Then 5, then 10. By then, she had moved to Denver, working for a major podcast network, hosting a show called Echo Trail, where she re-examined unsolved disappearances and wilderness mysteries. She covered the Dyatlov Pass incident, the Yosemite vanishings, and the case of the twins who vanished near Mount Rainier. But she always circled back to the Harringtons. "They were my first," she said in an interview, "and nothing else ever felt quite as personal. I remember Lily's favorite stuffed animal was a fox. Sam wore the same hat every hike. Rachel hummed while she walked." By 2023, most people had forgotten the story, until a hobbyist drone pilot, hiking just a few miles east of the South Pine Trail, sent a blurry video clip to the forestry department. It showed a long white shape under a thin layer of snow. Rectangular, tarp-like, not natural. The timestamp read, June 28, 2023, 14 years to the week since the Harringtons disappeared. And suddenly the silence was broken. It was a clear summer morning when Wyatt Keegan launched his drone from a flat outcrop near Copper Hollow, an area not far from where the South Pine Trail loops north into the thicker woods. The 32-year-old software developer from Fort Collins had taken up drone mapping as a side hobby during the pandemic, and he often spent weekends hiking remote areas to log new aerial scans for a public open-source project. Wyatt wasn't looking for anything specific that day. He was testing a new thermal imaging mod on his DJI Matt Rice, flying over snow patches still clinging to shaded ridges after a colder-than-average June. The footage was mostly dull. Tree canopy, rock faces, and heatless snow. But when he got home that evening and reviewed the feed frame by frame, something made him freeze. At timestamp 2 hours 43 minutes and 19 seconds, as the drone banked over a slope on the northwest edge of a gully, the camera caught a rectangular shape, unnatural in both symmetry and material. Half buried under translucent layers of old snow and debris, it looked like nylon fabric stretched taut and slightly crumpled. Blue-gray, faded, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. He zoomed in, then again. The corners were staked, one side lifted slightly like it had collapsed inward. The texture resembled tent fabric. He paused the video and stared. "Holy crap," he whispered. Wyatt uploaded the video to a wilderness hikers forum that evening, titling the post "Weird Structure Under Snow Near Copper Hollow." He included the clip, a still image, and the coordinates. Comments trickled in, some joked about aliens or Bigfoot camps, but one user, at Dana Crowley Podcast, replied an hour later, "Please DM me. This looks familiar." Dana Crowley hadn't been on that forum in over a year. She had an alert set up for keywords related to the Harrington case and got pinged by the post title. When she opened the footage, her stomach dropped. She'd spent years poring over topographic overlays, cross-checking the original search zones with modern mapping data. This spot, this exact ridge, had been just outside the original perimeter. A low-priority zone at the time, dismissed due to lack of trail access. Within 2 hours, she was on the phone with Leadville Forestry Services. Within 12, the sheriff's department had eyes on the location. Deputy Laurel Hart and 2 forest rangers arrived on foot the next morning. It took them nearly 5 hours to climb the ridge and reach the coordinates. The wind was sharp despite the summer sun, the last snowdrifts crunchy beneath their boots. When they found the site, no one spoke for a full minute. There, half submerged in hardened slush and pine needles, was a collapsed tent. The fabric was shredded in places, but the poles remained intact, still curved as if waiting for someone to crawl back inside. One flap had come loose, fluttering slightly in the breeze. Beside it, partially covered in snowmelt runoff, were 2 water bottles, a hiking boot, and the plastic casing of a flashlight. Hart radioed it in. "We've got a confirmed structure. Unknown age. Requesting forensic support and evidence team. Coordinates logged." The site was immediately roped off. No one touched anything. Photos were taken. A geolocation grid was established to mark every item's exact position. That night, news broke quietly on a few local sites. Possible break in 14-year-old disappearance case. By morning, it was everywhere. Dana Crowley arrived in Leadville 2 days later with her podcast producer and audio gear in tow. The town hadn't changed much. The same faded motel signs, same diner menu specials. But something felt electric in the air. She set up interviews with the sheriff's department and was granted limited access to the recovery team's findings. What she learned chilled her. The tent was indeed a model sold in the mid-2000s, matching one confirmed on the Harrington's original hiking inventory. The fabric bore the faded logo of Summit Elk Series 2. Inside the tent were 2 sleeping bags, one adult-sized and one child-sized, both heavily degraded but still recognizable. They also found a small mesh bag containing toothbrushes, a hairbrush with blonde strands still woven in, and a plastic sandwich container, empty but sealed. Nearby, tangled in brush, was a child's fleece hoodie, blue with dinosaurs printed on the front. Size 6T. Most chilling of all was a laminated hiking map. It had been folded repeatedly, the creases torn from water damage. A black marker had circled part of the South Pine Loop. Written in fading ink next to it, "Don't go this way, too quiet." And beneath that, coordinates that led just a half-mile west, deeper into Copper Hollow. The last entry in a small field journal was dated July 8, 2009. The discovery ignited the town. Locals held vigils. News vans returned. Hashtags like hashtag Find the Harringtons and hashtag Echo of the Trail began trending on social media. Dana released a special episode of Echo Trail, detailing the drone footage, the recovery, and what it might mean. And then the floodgates opened. A former search and rescue volunteer named Miguel Torres reached out anonymously, requesting to speak off-record. Dana met him behind the ranger station, both of them sitting in the cab of his parked truck. "I saw something," he said, "back then. Something they told us not to follow." He explained that, on day 4 of the original search, his unit had picked up a faint thermal signature near the Copper Hollow Ridge, a heat bloom that registered for just a few seconds before disappearing. They assumed it was an animal or a glitch, but he'd wanted to follow it. The team leader told him no. "We had too little daylight," said it was out of scope. "We moved on." Dana asked why he was coming forward now. "Because something about this tent, it lines up. I've never stopped thinking about that blip on the screen. Never." The evidence team continued sweeping the site for days. Underneath the collapsed tent, protected by layers of ice, they found more personal items. A drawing on yellow construction paper with a name in shaky pencil, Sam. A deck of Uno cards. A crushed juice box. But still, no bodies. No skeletal remains. No bones. No clothing remains that might indicate injury or death. Only the items. Forensic analysis confirmed DNA traces belonging to Rachel and Sam on the sleeping bags and brushes. Further testing would take weeks, but the working theory was becoming clearer. The Harringtons had made camp here, but they had not stayed. The mystery only deepened. Where had they gone? And why had they left everything behind? At a press briefing, Sheriff Hart said, "This is a significant development, but it is not closure. We have evidence that the Harrington family was present at this location in 2009. We do not, however, have conclusive answers as to what happened after. Dana left the conference with more questions than when she arrived. That night, she sat alone in her motel room, staring at a printout of the recovered map. Her eyes drifted to the handwritten warning. "Don't go this way. Too quiet." She knew what she had to do next. She had to follow the path they'd avoided. 3 days after the discovery of the tent, the site was transformed from a remote curiosity to a full-scale forensic scene. Yellow tape fluttered from fir trees. Search techs in white Tyvek suits moved cautiously through the thawing landscape with tweezers and evidence bags. The temperature had risen steadily since the tent was uncovered, accelerating the melt and revealing more objects hour by hour. Dana stood just beyond the taped boundary, watching quietly as investigators brushed away slush from a half-frozen patch of ground beside the tent. A soft thud of metal on dirt signaled something beneath. A shovel dug in. Moments later, a field tech lifted a small, dented thermos from the ground. Its painted label faded, but the outline of a cartoon fox was still visible. It was Lily's. Dana felt her breath catch in her throat. She remembered that thermos. It had shown up in one of Rachel's old Facebook photos, packed neatly beside sandwiches and carrot sticks. She remembered the caption. "Lily says hiking fuel needs to be hot cocoa, not trail mix." Now it sat in a forensic evidence bag, stained and rusting. The past had broken through the snow. Inside the tent, investigators discovered even more. One of the sleeping bags, child-sized, had been zipped shut around a small pillow with a faded flannel cover. Pressed into the fabric were 4 woven friendship bracelets, still looped loosely together as if placed there intentionally. Each bracelet bore a different color pattern: red and green, blue and white, yellow and black, pink and orange, all handmade, all clearly kept as tokens. They also found a small composition notebook under the collapsed center of the tent, warped by moisture but still legible in parts. The cover had a sticker of a ladybug on it. It was Rachel's. The handwriting inside alternated between neat, looping lines and hurried scribbles. The earlier entries described trail conditions, meal plans, and a note about a twisted ankle Mark had suffered midway through the ascent. But later entries took a darker turn. July 7th, 7:12 p.m. Mark says it's nothing, just wind, but I heard it again. Something beyond the ridge. Not an animal. Too quiet afterward. Lily's scared. I told her it was a bird. July 8th, 10:01 a.m. The trail feels different today. Everything's still. No bugs, no birds. Even the trees look wrong, like they're leaning the wrong way. Sam cried last night. Mark didn't sleep. July 8th, 2:44 p.m. Heard knocking last night. Not loud. Repeating. 5 taps. Then silence. 5 again. Then nothing. Can't explain it. The final entry ended mid-sentence. Rachel, 6:03 p.m. I think someone's out there. I don't know what they. The pen line trailed off the page. By the 5th day, searchers expanded the perimeter by a quarter-mile in every direction. At 3:20 p.m., a ranger flagged a strange indentation in the snow under a dense cluster of trees. It appeared circular, unusual for a natural melt pattern. Beneath the top layer, they uncovered a blue rubber sandal with a child's name barely visible on the strap. Sam. Next to it, buried in damp soil, was a torn piece of laminated paper. Part of a park brochure from 2009, featuring safety tips for hiking in the Sawatch Range. On the back, written in faint pencil, West Trail. Red stone. Water noise. Don't look if it knocks. The words were spaced unevenly. The lines slanted. The writing appeared rushed, possibly by a child. Dana sat with it that night, staring at the photo she took of the note. Her mind raced. What knocks? What did they see? She interviewed the park's former head ranger, Paul Strickland, who had since retired and moved to Colorado Springs. Over tea in his backyard, Strickland admitted something he'd never shared publicly. There's a stretch out there past Copper Hollow where the forest just shifts, he said. I always thought it was wind tunnels or pressure changes, but radio stopped working. Animals avoid it. We had more missing persons there than any other part of the park. I used to joke it was haunted, but when the Harringtons disappeared, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. Dana asked why that area hadn't been searched more aggressively back then. He sighed. Funding, manpower, and frankly, we didn't want to believe there was something out there we couldn't explain. That phrase stayed with her. Something we couldn't explain. Later that week, an old volunteer from the 2009 search team contacted Dana. Her name was Linda Brooks, a local schoolteacher who had helped organize map checkpoints for the search parties. I was sorting through my attic last night, she said, and I found an old disposable camera I never developed. It was from the trail effort. Dana met her the next morning. The film was still intact. She paid to have it expedited through a Denver lab. Of the 22 photos developed, most were unremarkable, shots of trees, supply tables, people posing with binoculars. But one image showed the Copper Hollow Ridge from a strange angle, taken from higher ground, looking down on the gully where the tent had now been found. And in the lower right corner, just barely in frame, a shape, humanoid, blurry, standing between two trees. The forensic analyst at the lab enhanced the photo as much as possible. The figure had no visible facial detail, but the proportions were off, arms too long, torso narrow, legs partially obscured by shadow. It appeared to be facing the tent area. That could be pareidolia, the analyst said cautiously. Our brains try to see people in patterns, shadows, branches. But Dana wasn't so sure, especially when she compared the angle of that figure to the knocking pattern Rachel had written about. 5 taps. Silence. 5 again. Could it have been a warning? A ritual? A threat? Or something else entirely? The media frenzy peaked again. National news outlets returned to the town. The Harrington story, long buried under years of speculation, was resurrected with fresh fire. But not everyone welcomed it. Rachel's sister Elise, now living in Arizona, refused all interviews. I can't do this again, she told one outlet. I lost them once. I don't want to lose them a second time in the headlines. Dana understood, but she also felt something deeper tugging at her. An intuition that the story wasn't finished yet. Too many clues, too many breadcrumbs left behind. And then she received an email that changed everything. Subject line, I saw her, 2017. She asked me not to tell. No signature, just GPS coordinates. And a name, Lily. The email arrived at 2:16 a.m. It contained no salutation, no backstory. Just that cryptic subject line, a string of GPS coordinates, and one name typed without punctuation. Lily. Dana sat upright in her motel bed, blinking in disbelief. Her mind raced through possibilities. Hoax, misdirection, or maybe, just maybe, a breakthrough. She cross-referenced the coordinates. They pointed to a narrow forested area roughly 3.4 miles west of Copper Hollow. just beyond an unmarked offshoot trail branching from a rockslide zone that had been closed to the public since 2011. She leaned over her notebook and flipped back to the photograph of the map found at the tent site. The one with the words, "Don't go this way. Too quiet." The GPS point from the email landed squarely inside the region circled and labeled in that same worn ink. The one they never followed. Her next step was clear. Dana assembled a small team. Herself, her audio producer Caleb, and a local survival expert named Anna Rothman who had previously consulted on missing hiker cases. They notified park services and were granted temporary access with a forestry escort. Weather conditions were stable, and they packed gear for a 2-day expedition. They set off early, hiking west through underbrush dense with wild sage and pine. The trail quickly vanished into overgrown terrain. The deeper they walked, the more the air changed, heavier somehow, as if the trees were pressing inward. Birds went quiet by midday. At 1:43 p.m., Anna called out. There, half buried under moss and decayed leaves, lay a rusted ammo box. The kind used by geocachers. The latch was broken. Inside, a plastic bag holding 3 items. A small child's mitten, purple, embroidered with stars. A shattered walkie-talkie, battery corroded. A damaged digital camera, its screen cracked and body water stained. Dana recognized the mitten from old photos. It was Sam's. They camped nearby, careful to preserve the scene. That evening, as dusk stretched shadows across the clearing, Dana stared at the camera in her hands. She couldn't stop thinking about the name in the email. Lily. Was it real? Could she have survived? Where had she gone? The next morning, they hiked out and handed over the items to forensic teams in Leadville. The camera was sent to a specialist lab in Denver to attempt data recovery. 2 days later, Dana received a call. There are 5 video files, the technician said, all time-stamped July 9, 2009. He paused. They're short, grainy, but you'll want to see them. Dana watched them alone in the small conference room at the sheriff's station. The first clip was shaky, handheld, filmed from inside the tent. Sam and Lily sat cross-legged, giggling as they played with Uno cards. In the corner, Rachel's voice murmured something about lunch. It was bright, normal, peaceful. The second clip cut in abruptly, nighttime. The tent was dark, lit only by a weak flashlight. Rachel whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't answer if you hear anything. Don't leave until I come back." Then static. The third clip, less than 6 seconds, showed a figure outside the tent. Just a silhouette, unmoving, standing several feet away behind the nylon wall. Then the shadow shifted and vanished. The fourth video was the longest. It showed Rachel, pale, exhausted, speaking directly into the lens, whispering, "We're not lost. We're being followed. If someone finds this, please take care of them. Mark left last night. I don't know if he's coming back. I hear knocking now when I close my eyes." Then she turned the camera to Lily, sleeping, arm wrapped around Sam. "They don't know yet. I have to keep it that way." The final clip was mostly black, but a sound could be heard. 5 knocks. A pause. 5 again. Slower this time. Then nothing. The sheriff's office released a brief statement confirming the authenticity of the footage and the discovery of the cache. Public speculation surged. Commentators debated whether the family had encountered a person or something else. Online sleuths dug into historical disappearances in the same region. Some suggested cult activity. Others pointed to survivalists or recluses living off-grid. But for Dana, the question narrowed. Was Lily still alive? She turned back to the email and traced the IP origin. It was masked through multiple VPNs but eventually linked to a public Wi-Fi hotspot, one located outside a gas station in Grand Junction, Colorado. Security footage showed a woman using the station's exterior bench and laptop 2 days prior to the email's arrival. The image was grainy, but Dana froze when she saw it. The woman had long, pale blonde hair pulled into a braid. A dragonfly-shaped pin rested at the end, identical to the one Rachel used to wear. She appeared to be in her early 20s. Lily would have been 23. Through informal channels, Dana connected with a man named James Redley, an ex-private investigator turned digital tracker. He agreed to help find the woman in the footage, and within days he had a possible match. A cabin rental listed outside Delta, Colorado. Paid for in cash. No name. The property manager said the woman kept to herself, wore gloves even in summer, and didn't speak much. She rented monthly and always declined cleaning services. Dana made the 2-hour drive on a quiet Tuesday, unsure of what she would find. When she arrived, the cabin was empty, but a truck was parked nearby. She waited on the porch, heart hammering. An hour later, footsteps approached from the woods. And then, she saw her. The woman stood cautiously at the tree line, watching. She wore hiking boots, a long-sleeved flannel, and a gray ball cap pulled low. Her face was older, sharper, shaped by years and hardship, but unmistakably familiar. Dana didn't speak. The woman took a few slow steps forward, then more, until they were 10 feet apart. Finally, she said in a quiet, cracked voice, "You're the one from the podcast." Dana nodded. The woman looked down. "I knew you'd come eventually." A pause. "I'm Lily." They spoke for nearly 2 hours inside the cabin. No cameras, no microphones. Lily refused to be recorded. Her story came slowly, pieced together between long silences. She remembered the hike, the strange quiet, the feeling of being watched, the knocking. Her father had gone missing on the second night, leaving only a note. "If I can distract it, maybe you can run." Her mother tried to keep them hidden, but something or someone kept finding them. Lily said her mother died during a storm, fell, slipped trying to climb down a ridge. She buried her under rocks. Sam vanished during the night 2 days later. "I searched for him for a week. Then I stopped looking." A man had found her, an old man living off-grid. She never gave a name. He had food, shelter, rules. She stayed, too scared to return, too ashamed. "I didn't know what to say, what to tell people. That I lived, and they didn't." She had used the email to alert Dana. She didn't want to be found, but part of her needed someone to know the truth. Dana asked if she'd consider coming forward. Lily shook her head. "Not yet." Then she handed Dana a notebook. They deserved to be remembered right. Inside the notebook were drawings, dates, names, details only Lily could know. Confirmations of what had happened after the tent, after the silence. And one final thing taped to the last page. A photograph. Rachel, Mark, Lily, and Sam. Taken on the morning of their last hike. Rachel is midlaff. Sam is trying to climb on Mark's back. Lily is holding up a rock shaped like a heart. For lives frozen in sunlight. Dana stared at it for a long time before closing the cover. Some answers had finally come. But the mountain still held secrets. And it wasn't finished. Not yet. After her meeting with Lily, Dana drove back to Leadville in silence. her thoughts a storm of half-formed questions. She had spent 14 years chasing fragments, trying to stitch together a narrative from scraps of fabric, pencil scribbles, and blurred photographs. But now, with Lily's handwritten notebook in her backpack, a clearer, yet more disturbing pattern was beginning to form. Lily had survived. That was a miracle. But what she described, a hidden man in the forest, strange knocking patterns, the vanishing of her brother, wasn't just trauma-induced memory. Too many elements matched physical evidence. The knocking, the avoided trail, the presence of a person not in the family. Dana couldn't shake the feeling. Someone had been watching them, following them, maybe even hunting them. She began combing through unsolved missing person reports tied to the Sawatch Range in the decade before the Harringtons disappeared. What she found chilled her. In 2003, a solo hiker named Evan Roth had disappeared while camping along the northern ridge of Copper Hollow. His tent was found fully intact, gear untouched, but no trace of him. Police suspected a misstep or fall. In 2005, 2 college students from Denver vanished on a photo expedition. Their Jeep was discovered at the base of the ridge. A single camera strap hung from a tree branch 300 feet above the trail, but the rest of their gear was never recovered. In 2007, a father and son, Jason and Tyler Bray, went missing during an overnight camping trip. Their fire pit was still warm when searchers arrived. Only the boys' backpack was found, zipped shut and placed in the center of their tent. And in each of these reports, 5 knocks, noted by witnesses or family members before the disappearances. Not one of these cases had been linked together. Until now. Dana met with FBI analyst Michael Renner, who specialized in long-term disappearance patterns. She presented him with Lily's story, the notebook, the cache location, and the 4 matching cases. Renner's eyes narrowed as he scanned the files. "This isn't random," he said. "You're describing an anchor pattern." "An anchor pattern?" Dana asked. "It's used by highly intelligent predators. They stake a specific location, often with natural camouflage, difficult terrain, minimal foot traffic, and they stay near it for years, watching, waiting." Renner pulled out a printed topographic map. "Your anchor point is here," he said, circling Copper Hollow and its surrounding ridge. "And if I map the disappearances over time," he connected them one by one. They formed a spiral, tightening toward a single point, an isolated plateau just past the area labeled on the Harringtons' recovered map. "Don't go this way." A fresh search team was assembled, this time under federal guidance. Park authorities closed off several trails under the pretense of erosion concerns. But behind the scenes, they were mounting a quiet expedition. 3 weeks after the tent's discovery, a team of rangers, FBI agents, and forensics entered the ridge past Copper Hollow. They used thermal drones, ground-penetrating radar, and historical satellite scans. It didn't take long. Less than a mile beyond the red stone formation marked in Rachel's journal, they found it. A cabin, camouflaged under thick pine canopy, hidden behind boulders, and surrounded by a wall of dry brush that had clearly been arranged intentionally. There was no chimney, no power lines, no visible windows, but it was structurally sound and well-maintained. Inside, they found a horror. The single-room interior was dark, lit only by a small skylight. There were no decorations, no personal items, just rows of shelves along the walls containing supplies. Canned food, water bottles, batteries, fuel tabs, duct tape, rope, flashlights, and in the far corner, a bulletin board. Tacked to it were photos, not printed photos. Photographs clearly taken by a low-quality camera. Grainy, zoomed in from a distance. All of hikers, families, lone campers, children. One photo was unmistakable. The Harringtons, crossing a stream, Lily holding Rachel's hand. Another showed them at the trailhead, climbing out of their SUV. Below each photo were notes: arrival times, gear descriptions, estimated group size. And next to those, 5 tally marks, scratched over and over in the wood, just beneath each image. Every group had them, even the ones never reported missing. A fingerprint sweep of the cabin turned up no matches in any federal database. The space had been wiped clean. Whoever lived there was methodical, careful. But they missed one thing. Behind the bulletin board, wedged into a crack in the wood, was a folded piece of paper. It was part of a park brochure like the one Sam had written on. But this one had a short message in the margin. The boy screamed too much. Buried by the rocks. She didn't see. Dana read it over and over, her hands trembling. Was it referring to Sam? Did Rachel never realize? And who had written it? Search teams scoured the surrounding forest for days. A 1,000-yard radius was mapped and divided into search grids. It was slow work, navigating uneven terrain and animal dens. But eventually, under a bed of dead leaves and stones near a tree line, they found a shallow grave. It contained partial skeletal remains, small bones, a child's shoe. Dental records later confirmed Sam Harrington. He had been buried carefully, purposefully. The body bore no signs of animal predation, and the scene was undisturbed. The discovery rocked the investigation and the public. National media returned with renewed urgency. Body of missing Harrington child found near hidden cabin. FBI investigates possible serial predator in Colorado wilderness. The man who knocked. Copper Hollow's chilling pattern. Dana's podcast episodes topped streaming charts within hours. But still, no sign of the person responsible. And Lily remained in hiding, her silence growing heavier by the day. Then came the break they hadn't expected. An old friend of Dana's, Noah Brenner, a photojournalist who had covered wildfires in the Rockies, reached out. He had recently been reviewing old drone footage for a documentary on climate change. One sequence, taken in late 2017, included an aerial pan of a heavily wooded ridge near Copper Hollow. In one frame, just 4 seconds long, a figure was visible behind the treeline, standing still, no identifying features. But the man was holding something, a large format camera, the kind used for telephoto images, a military-grade model not typically owned by civilians. Brenner had dismissed it at the time as a ranger or research technician, but now it looked different, especially when Dana zoomed in, because next to the figure, partially hidden by brush, was a dog, a brindle-coated mastiff. Lily had mentioned a dog once. Briefly, she'd said, "He never went far without that thing. I think it kept him calm." The FBI reclassified the case from missing persons to serial predator, active fugitive. But without a name or face, their leads were limited. They needed Lily. Dana drove back to the cabin in Delta. But this time it was empty. No truck, no gear, no Lily. Just a note pinned to the door. "You said their story should be heard. That's enough for now. Please don't follow me. L." Dana stood on the porch for a long time. The mountains around her were quiet again. But for the first time in 14 years, they had started to answer. 3 weeks had passed since Lily vanished from the rental cabin in Delta. Dana checked in every day through local gas station clerks, public library internet logs, wilderness supply stores, but there was no trace of her. The note she'd left felt final. She had spoken her truth in the only way she could, and now she was gone again, like mist pulling back into the trees. The FBI, meanwhile, intensified their investigation. Dozens of interviews were conducted across the western slope. A new task force was quietly formed in coordination with wilderness law enforcement and missing persons units from other states. For the first time in over a decade, the Harrington case had a full-time, dedicated team. But without Lily, the emotional thread, the living voice of the mystery, was gone. Dana felt it, and so did the world. Then, on a damp Thursday morning in late October, Dana received a manila envelope in the mail. No return address, no postage, just one word typed on the front in capital letters: "Listen." Inside were 3 things: a micro SD card, a crumpled piece of notebook paper with only a set of coordinates written in red ink, a Polaroid photo, aged, curling at the edges, a shot of Lily as a child, standing near a pine tree, wearing the same dinosaur fleece Sam had worn. It was taken the morning of their hike. She was holding up 3 fingers. 3 survived the first night. Only 1 made it home. The SD card contained 1 audio file. Dana played it in her podcast studio, alone, hands trembling as she listened. The voice was unmistakably Lily's. But it wasn't polished or rehearsed like Dana's interviews. It was raw, shaky, vulnerable. "I know you want answers. I don't have all of them, but I have pieces. Enough." A pause, a breath. There was someone out there. He didn't speak much, but he watched. We saw him more than once. Always in the distance. Always still. Mom thought he was another hiker at first. But then she started hearing the knocks. They'd come at night. 5 knocks. Then nothing. 5 again. After Dad disappeared, we stopped making noise. Stopped cooking. Stopped playing cards. We just waited. Then he came closer. There was a sound. Lily swallowing, gathering herself. He didn't drag me. He didn't hurt me. He just looked at me and said, "You're alone now." Then he turned and started walking. I followed because I was scared. Because I was 9. Because I didn't want to be in the tent anymore with my mom's things and Sam's drawings and nothing else. I stayed with him for months. Maybe longer. I don't remember how long. He lived simply. Off the land. He didn't let me ask questions. Said it made the forest angry. I thought he was protecting me, but he wasn't. He just didn't want to be alone. Her voice trembled. There were others before us. I saw things. Hikers. Photographs. Notes. Even a necklace once. Buried in a tin box. Not mine. He didn't call himself anything, but I named him the Quiet Man, because he never raised his voice. Not once. The file ended there. Dana sent the recording to the FBI. They verified the voice as consistent with known recordings of Lily Harrington. A new search was launched at the coordinates found in the envelope, this time with special agents leading the way. At the designated spot, located in a ravine 6 miles east of the hidden cabin, they found a wooden crate buried beneath 2 flat stones. Inside were a pocket knife, a cloth map of the Copper Hollow region, and 5 cassette tapes, each labeled only by number. The tapes were degraded, warped from moisture, but 2 were recoverable. The first held ambient sound, forest noise, light rain, wind. The second contained a single recording. A man's voice spoke softly, measured. They don't listen. That's their weakness. They think the forest is just dirt and water. But it breathes. It chooses. She listens. The girl. She hears it. She can stay. The rest was static. A new profile emerged from the behavioral analysis unit. They now believed the predator, nicknamed internally as the Quiet Man, was a long-term off-grid individual, likely male, early 60s when last seen, possibly former military or survivalist, with deep distrust of society. He selected families or lone hikers not at random but based on movement patterns, those who lingered too long in the same stretch of woods, who didn't follow marked trails. He watched, he waited, he isolated, and in the Harrington's case, he took. But with no full name, no face, and no direct evidence tying any known suspect to the site, authorities couldn't issue an arrest warrant. There was no certainty he was still alive. No proof Lily's memories were enough to pursue. Yet the fear spread. For the first time in recent memory, parts of the Sawatch Range were officially labeled as restricted by U.S. Forest Services. Not for fires, not for floods, but for unusual safety hazards under federal review. Hikers online dubbed it the Silent Zone. People left offerings at the old Harrington bench. Ribbons, stuffed foxes, a laminated copy of the last entry in Rachel's journal. I think someone's out there. Dana published the story in full as a multi-part podcast series titled The Knock. It became a phenomenon. People around the country, many with missing relatives, reached out. Some claimed they'd heard knocks while camping. Others remembered figures standing still beneath trees, half seen at twilight. It sparked conversations about wilderness safety, off-grid disappearances, and the psychological toll of long-term trauma. But for Dana, the goal was simpler. Give Lily her voice. Let the world hear what she survived. Because the silence wasn't just dangerous. It had been weaponized. The series ended with Dana speaking directly to the microphone. No music, no filters. She was 9 years old when she walked into those woods. She came back changed. But she came back. That alone is a story worth telling. That alone is a reason to listen. A week later, a final envelope arrived at the studio. No note, just a flash drive. Inside it, a photo. It was recent, taken with a digital camera. Framed perfectly. Lily sitting by a fire. Older now, weathered, but smiling slightly. Beside her, a fox thermos. And scrawled in the corner of the photo in black marker, "I'm okay." Dana held the photo to her chest. She didn't cry. She just nodded. The first snow of the season fell on Leadville the morning the FBI officially closed the Harrington investigation. 14 years, 3 months, and 17 days after the family left their home for a day hike they never returned from, the case was finally listed as resolved by confirmed survivor testimony and recovered remains. But for those who had followed the mystery, who had walked those trails and combed those ridges, it didn't feel resolved. Not entirely. There were still gaps, still shadows in the timeline, still one name missing from the official reports. The Quiet Man. No arrest had been made. No further sightings confirmed. The hidden cabin had been dismantled, its contents archived in a sealed evidence vault. Rangers posted signs warning of unstable terrain and landslide risks in the area. Excuses to keep people away. But those who lived nearby knew better, and they never stopped listening. Lily remained a ghost in the official narrative. Her name was mentioned only once in the final FBI press conference, as a credible first-hand witness. Her location was listed as unknown. The Bureau respected her request to stay hidden, protected by the trauma clause often granted to victims of long-term captivity and abuse. Dana respected it too, but she didn't stop writing. In the weeks following the final podcast episode, The Knock, Dana released a written account, part memoir, part investigation. It detailed her 14-year pursuit of the Harrington story, from the day she first arrived with a notebook and borrowed tent to the moment Lily whispered her name in that forest cabin. The book hit bestseller lists within days. Critics called it unflinching, haunting, a blueprint for ethical true crime storytelling. But for Dana, it was something else. Farewell. Not to the story, but to the silence. In the spring, a small private memorial was held in Willow Heights Cemetery, where a shared headstone had long marked the Harrington family's name. Until then, only Rachel and Mark's names had been etched into the granite. After Sam's remains were identified and returned, his name was added. Lily did not attend, but someone left 3 items at the base of the stone that week: purple mitten, a friendship bracelet, and a pine cone shaped like a heart. 6 months later, a breakthrough came, not in the Harrington case, but in one that had gone cold 20 years prior in Montana. A woman named Janelle Harmon had disappeared from a hiking retreat in 1993. Her last known location? A trail outside Whitefish. Her disappearance had baffled authorities at the time. Her backpack had been found beside a fire pit, her tent untouched. She was never seen again. But after Dana's podcast gained popularity, a listener, an amateur archivist named Glenn Malcolm, recognized a description from the hidden cabin's inventory list: a hair clip engraved with initials JH and a faded business card for Trailhead Outfitters, Missoula. The clip had been cataloged by the FBI but never matched. Now it was, and with that, the case reopened. The FBI began coordinating with other states, re-examining disappearances that had once seemed unrelated. Utah, Idaho, Northern California, Oregon, all had forests. All had hikers who vanished without explanation. Some had similarities: 5 knocks, and used gear, unnatural silence. A new term began circulating internally: serial wilderness abductor. A new possibility took root: that the quiet man hadn't always lived in Colorado, that the Sawatch Range had been his last anchor, not his only one. The story continued to ripple outward. Podcasts, documentaries, TED Talks on predator psychology, and the failure of early law enforcement to connect the dots. Dana consulted on multiple media projects but declined interviews. She had said what needed to be said. Instead, she began working with a coalition of wilderness safety nonprofits. Together, they launched the Harrington Initiative, a movement to establish safe points in high-risk hiking zones. Ranger-monitored shelters with emergency phones, cameras, and 24/7 radio access. One was placed near Copper Hollow, at the base of the ridge where the tent was found. On its outer wall, a plaque read, "In memory of the Harrington family, for the ones who stayed, for the ones who listened, and for the ones who came back." Back in Boulder, Rachel's sister Elise finally opened the last box of belongings that had been left untouched in her garage for over a decade. Inside were photo albums, school drawings, Lily's old swim ribbons. At the bottom, beneath a folder of Rachel's physical therapy certifications, she found a small, spiral-bound notebook. The cover was decorated with stickers, foxes, stars, and one small silver dragonfly. It was Rachel's hike prep list, each entry dated, precise, and at the bottom of the final page, scribbled in rushed handwriting, barely legible: "If we don't make it home, Tell her we were trying to protect her. Tell her she was never the reason. Tell her she was our light." Elise wept alone for a long time that night. Then she mailed the notebook to Dana with a note. "This belongs in her story. Wherever she is, I hope she knows she wasn't forgotten." Months passed. The news cycle moved on. But once a year, Dana made the same hike she had made in 2009. She followed the South Pine Loop, climbed the ridge, past the old stream crossing where the last photo of the Harringtons had been taken. And just off the trail, nestled near a stone outcrop, she left a thermos. Same one as always, bright orange, scuffed, dented, filled with cocoa. No name attached, just a note. "You're not alone." And sometimes, when she returned weeks later, the thermos was gone. The mountain still held its secrets, but it had given some back. Not all, but enough. For now.